Last night, Donald Trump and some of his most degraded followers, minions, and enablers held a fascist rally here in New York City, my home. The depraved and violent rhetoric, which was openly racist, misogynistic, and threatening, shook me. There was something qualitatively different about it, even though the Trump campaign has been engaging in similar kinds of rhetoric for a long time now. Last night, it just felt like something shifted. It felt like a death, honestly. As often happens after a loss, I woke up this morning and had a brief respite during which I'd forgotten about last night's rally. And then, of course, it all came rushing back to me with the full force of just how horrific it was. I imagine millions of Americans are feeling the same way. Those of us who watched the twisted and just completely unhinged rage coming from deviants like Stephen Miller and Tucker Carlson and their dear leader, Donald Trump. For those of you who aren't aware, in 1939, there was a pro-Hitler rally at Madison Square Garden. It was replete with brown shirts and swastikas. 22,000 people showed up for that rally. And last night, at least 20,000 attended, as far as I know. But they were mostly wearing red hats and flying Trump 2024 flags. In 1939, the event was called America First. Last night's rally was called a pro-America rally because it is true. History rhymes. And this is what they mean by pro-America.
You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
That's alleged comedian Tony Hinchcliffe comparing Puerto Rico, whose citizens vote in American presidential elections, to garbage. That's also the crowd cheering him wildly. Hinchcliffe has since said that it was just a joke and that just Democrats just don't have a sense of humor and we should just get over ourselves because we don't understand how comedy works. First of all, Tony, it wasn't funny. And secondly, it wasn't a joke. I mean, this is language straight out of the Trump campaign playbook. Here's what else Hinchcliffe had to say.
I welcome migrants to the United States of America with open arms. And by open arms, I mean like this. It's wild. And these Latinos, they love making babies too. Just know that. They do. They do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. They come inside, just like they did to our country. Republicans are the party with a good sense of humor.
This dehumanizing rhetoric, claiming certain groups are subhuman or not human at all, reducing people to crude stereotypes, this is straight up fascism. Of course, it did not stop there. Check this out.
We need to slaughter this other people. We need to bring 100 million votes to Donald Trump.
You got homeless and veterans, Americans sleeping on their own feces on a bench in Central Park. But the fucking illegals, they get whatever they want, don't they?
This went on for over 6 hours. The evening devolved from racist jokes that weren't really jokes to outright unvarnished calls for slaughter to the kind of raw, unfiltered hatred far too many Americans and far too many in the American media have become numb to. This is how normalization works. This is how the unacceptable becomes acceptable. Donald has very few skills, but he's always been extremely adept at pushing the envelope to see what he can get away with. This open display of fascism in the greatest American city had nothing to do with turning New York red. There is literally no universe in which New York will vote for a Republican presidential candidate, even if it isn't Donald Trump. He was there for two reasons: to stir up his base to even more extreme levels of hatred against their perceived enemies, and this is really important, to soften the ground for making political violence not just acceptable, but inevitable after Donald loses the election next week. The Trump campaign scrambled to distance itself from a lot of what was being said last night, but let's be very, very clear about something. This is exactly who they are. This is exactly who they've always been. They're just not hiding it anymore, right? I mean, they no longer feel bound by any conventions. They no longer feel constrained. And this is what they're trying to achieve. Here's evidence in their own words.
We must elect Donald J. Trump president because we must crush jihad.
It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, it was just a groundswell of popular support. And anyone who thinks otherwise is just a freak or a criminal.
Defeat them, and when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy, becomes a sound. Oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. And one thing I have been, even the enemy, because they are the enemy, what they've said, even that enemy too, and they're really the enemy. They're the enemy of the people, the press.
When Donald calls his opponents the enemy within, and he says that people like us are worse than dictators like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, he's making us targets. When his supporters, who in following his lead, attempt to dehumanize entire communities while calling for slaughter, they're increasing the likelihood of political violence. They know exactly what they're doing, and it seems increasingly likely that that is exactly what they want. And then, of course, we have the Republican Party not just going along with it, but bending over backwards to legitimize this. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson showed up last night at this fascist hate rally and said this.
We revere the founding principles. We revere our Judeo-Christian foundations. We revere individual freedom and limited government and the rule of law and peace through strength and fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity, secure borders. But the other team doesn't anymore, my friends. This is not your father's Democratic Party. They are now full on to Marxism and socialism. They don't envision for us to save the founding principles and the greatest nation in the history of the world. Instead, what they envision for us is that we would be some sort of European-style Marxist borderless utopia.
Yes, Mike Johnson, who was instrumental in trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election in 2020, said with a straight face that the party whose presidential nominee has recently been convicted on 34 felony counts and is currently out on bail in 3 different jurisdictions, that party is the party of law and order. Irony and hypocrisy at that point formed a suicide pact. A big part of the right's agenda at this point is to create elaborate falsehoods and attempt to manipulate reality while telling their followers not to believe their own eyes. It's all they've got, really. So check this out.
They spent 10 years telling you Trump is a hater. Do you feel that on him? No, you don't. Because it's not there. I've spent a lot of time with Trump. And there's not one moment I've ever been with him off camera where he's spending his time grousing about people he hates. Ever. It's requited. It's requited. They know. When he goes to McDonald's and serves fries, like, he's not faking that at all.
Any of the attempts they make to humanize Donald which is an impossible task, obviously, are staged. Every move is calculated. Every word chosen is chosen with the aim of normalizing a man who is completely abnormal and unfit. While the hatred was unveiled last night, some of the threats were designed to fly under the radar. Look at this.
And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact. He and I have a secret. We'll tell you what it is when the race is over. I also
make the margin of victory so big that you know what can't happen.
This is what fascists do, right? They create a sense of vague anxiety based on amorphous threats. Then they ramp up tension by hinting at violence coming from unknown quarters. They make their supporters feel like they're part of some grand conspiracy against the dangerous, aggressive other. Then they weaponize events like natural disasters, pandemics, and other human tragedies in order to divide us against each other.
Isn't her egregious hurricane response? They haven't even responded in North Carolina. They haven't even responded. There's nobody. They don't see any FEMA. You know why? They spent their money on bringing in illegal migrants. So they didn't have money for Georgia and North Carolina and Alabama and Tennessee and Florida and South Carolina. They didn't have any money for them. They spent all of their money on bringing in illegal immigrants and flying them.
Dr. Phil, like why he, I don't know why he was there. I honestly completely forgot he existed, but he got his time in the spotlight and he used it to claim as only a hardcore white supremacist could, as only a guy who has failed upward his entire life simply because he's a white man, claimed that this country was built on hard work, not DEI. The implication being that the hard work was done by white people like him, I guess. But this was an abjectly false and completely racist claim. Remember, DEI stands for diversity, equality, and inclusion. Listen to this.
By the way, we didn't choose the name for that by random. Merit Street Media. This country was built on hard work, added value, and talent, not on equal outcome, not on DEI. This country was built on hard work.
Of course, those of us who are allowed to read history books still know that white people stole this land from its original inhabitants, and then they committed genocide against them. Our country was built with the blood and on the backs of enslaved people who we kidnapped from their homelands in Africa. And then we stole their labor and we stole their generational wealth while committing genocide against them. That's the reality of American history. That's the reality that Donald Trump and people like him want us to forget. They want to erase from our history the people who belonged here first and the people who really built America. While Donald was rambling in his broken and disjointed way and his supporters cheered on every single vile piece of bigotry that was trotted out in front of them, Vice President Kamala Harris continued to draw the sharp distinction between her and the fascist who offers us no coherent policies. She was at a Puerto Rican restaurant in Philadelphia talking about a Puerto Rican Opportunity Economy Task Force, about fixing the electrical grid, about treating all Americans with dignity and respect. I have to confess, last night kind of shook me to the core. It was not surprising again, but still shocking. We should still be capable of shock. There were, however, a few silver linings to be found in last night's horrifying debacle. First of all, as I said earlier, back in 1939, about 22,000 Americans attended the pro-Hitler rally. On the other hand, though, outside of that rally, there were 100,000 of us protesting. The backlash against the dark spectacle last night has been near universal. That's important. Secondly, Bad Bunny, who is one of the most influential people from Puerto Rico, joined two of the other most influential Puerto Ricans in the world in endorsing Kamala Harris. In normal times, I don't think celebrity endorsements count for much, honestly, but this is a much, much bigger issue. These are cultural icons, many of whom would likely prefer to stay above the fray or out of the fray entirely, but they recognize the importance of this historical moment, and they are taking a stand against fascism, even though there's a good possibility it's going to cost them in some fashion. And that brings us to the last silver lining. Everything is out in the open now. Absolutely everything. Even for those who have not wanted to face the truth about what's been happening, there is no denying anymore the danger that Donald Trump and his movement present to us. Not even corporate media, although I'm sure they'll try mightily, can whitewash what we saw and heard last night. And the Republican Party, who sent its most powerful representative and Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, can never again pretend that Donald Trump isn't their guy. Fascists, thousands of fascists came to my home last night and spoke their hatred without any fear of repercussion. These depraved thugs want us to feel broken. They want us to despair. So let's not do that, okay? If we stick together and stay the course, we have the power to lead this country into a future that leaves Donald Trump and his hateful accomplices in the dust permanently, because there are more of us than there are of them. Their masks are off, their hoods are off. We need to take our gloves off and keep our eyes wide open. Hey everybody, in case you weren't aware, I am spectacularly bad at self-promotion. So here goes. Please subscribe to our channel and like and share our videos. Your support means so much to all of us. Thank you.